what is thinking is an outstanding question. Yeah, that is a good question. I'm not a professor to be able to answer this properly, but I don't know that we really know exactly. Thinking is, well, we need to be awake, right? Actually, that's not entirely true, because there is a subconscious part of our brain that works simultaneously with the conscious part of our brain, and they've shown this, that where neural actions happen like as many as 400 microseconds, thousandths of a second before the actual awareness of that decision. So I like to think of this as actually a combination of essentially, if you will, two brains, an unconscious, subconscious brain and a conscious brain that are in continual back and forth communication. So thinking is I would call that sort of an emergent or higher level version of just neural signals moving around. Our brains are incredibly complex. There's something like 100 billion cells with like 100 billion connections or something. Or what was it? 10,000 connections per neuron. It's monstrously huge, and it's even hard to picture the physics, the physiology of it, what it would look like physically. So it's not just like one neuron going to another neuron going to another. It's like one going to 100 others, and feedback mechanisms and all this. So it's a very complex pathway and combination. People that study computers and neural networks can explain that better or describe it better. So it's a complex collection of neurosignals, right? And neurosignals, it's like we have neural pathways, but it's not a signal until the charge goes across that pathway. So if you think of what is a dog, there's going to be a certain pathway for that, although that's a very complicated idea. So we got to simplify it and simplify it and simplify it. So if you think of a dog, what's a dog made of? The concept of hair, the concept of straight versus curly, all these little concepts come together. So all of those little pieces have to be activated to get the concept of dog, which would be the higher level concept. So perhaps thinking is the collecting up of those little things, which means the firing and the activation of every one of those little things that then gives us the concept of dog. And when we think of cat, it's a different set of smaller things activated. So think of it as like if you could take a picture of the brain and put a photo in front of someone like candle or dog or house. Every one of those would have an analog to a completely different pattern in the brain. And we're learning over time, especially in the last 20 years or so, what that could possibly be, because we've been learning more about what sections of the brain do, and the hearing and sight happens back here and stuff, and cognition, which is understanding of complexity, happens up front here, the thinking. Some of the more basic stuff happens back in the middle of the head and in the lower brainstem, fear, things like that. I don't know. There's a lot of generalities. It's a good question for a neurologist. Let's see. Is anybody? Nope. Okay. So I'll keep doing questions. Smite. This is in response to somebody else. True, this is nonsense. A straw man. Stop being dishonest. I have a comment on the word dishonest. Some people would disagree. I think Ron will disagree with me on this one. I don't like to use the word dishonest. I think that most people are sincere in what they believe and what they're trying to say. So I don't perceive people giving misinformation, no, wrong information, false belief as being dishonest. Misinformation, now intentionality of deceiving and lying, that's dishonest. But I think it's generally unfair and probably most often incorrect to tell somebody else they're being dishonest. You don't know what's in their head. So you can critique the information they're giving you and try to point that stuff out and judge how they react to it. If they react defensively, if they go in circles with their logic, they may not know another way. I think presuppositionalists are so rooted in what they've been taught that they generally can't escape the loops that they've put themselves in. I wish I understood Kant better to know those arguments, but there's only so much I can do. I'd rather learn physics than philosophy better. So. Morality is dictated by society at large. I totally agree with that, which is why it's really important. And it's in every society at every time. So that's why it's incredibly important for us to always be debating what's moral and always be voting, right? Because what is acceptable behavior in a society at any point in time generally comes from a collective of all our subjective opinions, but that's only thoughts in our minds until it becomes turned into laws and things, and even then we have to work against laws that are written by people in power and stuff like that. So, but we do have a responsibility to either help define the morality in our current society, or others will define it for us. Prime time, literally, how is the Bible not evidence? I am on the side that the Bible is evidence. I think it's bad evidence. I'd call it feeble. It depends on what we're talking about. If we're talking about, is it evidence for a king or an ancient city? Yeah, because those are not unusual claims. So I don't have much of a problem at all having some confidence in that as evidence, even though in a way that's really no more justified than anything else that's mentioned in one book only. Certainly ancient cities are mentioned in many books, so we can use that as a reinforcement. Evidence for the supernatural? Sure, it's evidence for the supernatural. It is just really, really, really crappy evidence and nowhere near enough to get you anywhere close to believability. I think, let's see, the response back to that was the Bible is a claim. You can't use a claim as proof of itself. I see what you're getting, and as a general rule, I will agree with you, but the story of the Bible I think is the claim, in a way, if that makes sense. So the fact that the Bible exists is one level above claim. Again, barely. And perhaps you can even say, even an oral transmission of the story, if this, as it did happen right after Jesus' death, assume he existed, because nothing was written down for at least 20, 30 years. Everything was oral stories. The stories are also evidence. I mean, it's kind of like the absence of evidence issue. If there was no Jesus and no God, there could be a story, but there could also be no story. So that shows you how little the story is as evidence. And I am not aware of anything that can justify a supernatural claim using natural means, which could possibly mean it's true and we can never justify it, which means you should not be believing it. You have no justification for the belief. Alrighty. Well, I'm doing this again. If you guys wouldn't mind to help me out a little bit and put some love taps on the screen here and follow me, and when you get a chance, keep me in mind. Believe in reality. I'm on Instagram and YouTube and Threads, and I think I'm missing one when I do that. Facebook. All right. Let's see if I can grab one more. Jesse's girl. I feel like I have seen sufficient evidence in life after death. That's fair for you. You know, that's basically anecdote. So nobody can question your own experiences. Well, I mean, they can, but they can't prove it, right? It's like, because we know people have hallucinations. We know people make math errors and logical errors. But if you are convinced of something, that works as justification for your belief. However, it does not mean it's a true belief. So it means that you are justified because you've given it some thought or whatever, and you've seen what you interpret as evidence. That works for you, but we can't take a collective of anecdotes and make that into evidence for the existence of dragons. So it's weird on both sides, because if you think that is something true because 80% of the planet believes it, we know, of course, that's a fallacy. Doesn't mean it, but you, as a general rule, you would think there'd be something to that. So it's peculiar when we find ourselves in a few situations like, demon belief, that many people believe it, and yet we know it now to be objectively false, or have no basis for knowing it's true. Because I keep trying to rephrase myself so I get clear message across. So yeah, I mean, just be careful with life after death belief, because it changes your perspective of what life is about and what's important in life, and it changes your perspective on how you should treat other people in terms of them valuing their own life, and what right do you have to impose on their life in any way. So just be careful with that life belief, and be prepared at the end of life to be surrounded by doubt. I will say that. I have seen, I'm a pharmacist by trade, and I used to be on a chemo ward, and I've seen a priest with doubts die on the ward very fearfully. I think that's a societal problem that, not to say that there aren't people who do believe and die with some mental comfort too, but I given the reality of what seems to be coming to be shown to be true, future generations of humans, however many generations down the road, I think will be better served by understanding and coming to grips with the reality of mortality. I think it affects your decisions you make in your own life and decisions about how you treat other people. Certainly gets rid of the justification for starting wars based on religion. All right, let's do one more. Angelic Messenger. I'm gonna see if I can bring you up. Hello, hello.
Hey, thank you for bringing me on. How are you doing tonight?
It's been a pretty good night, I think. Yeah.
Good
You
night.
joined
That's
us.
good to hear.
Yeah. What's on your mind?
So I guess I have a few questions as far as trying to understand your perspective on things.
Mhm.
Um, would you prefer to start with more of, I guess, physics question or more of, I guess, philosophical question?
It is what's of interest to you that would like to hear.
Um, well, I guess everything in regards to your perspective is interest to me. So I guess to start, I would say and ask. We currently understand that energy cannot be created nor destroyed, and
Yeah, that appears to be true within our universe, yes.
yeah, within physical reality, that we have fundamentally proven that. And in regards to, I guess, more starting to study the human body, we understand it as a collection of energy physically. And we know and understand that when we do pass, that energy dissipates and it goes back to Earth. We know that for a fact.
A question or clarification on that.
Yeah.
By energy, do you mean energy and matter, or are you speaking about like auras or something that happens in addition to the physical mass?
Oh, energy and matter. Like we do become one with the dirt physically in a sense. At
Okay.
least our physical body does.
So E equals MC squared, be it energy or be it matter. Yeah, we go back to the universe, if you will, to the planet.
Yeah. Yeah, and very recently we've been able to scan the brain and the heart, and we've found that there's unique signatures of energy being produced by them. So it puts into question also in context of consciousness, knowing that that's a collection of energy that's different from the physical body. Consciousness is not of the same
No,
level of energy as the body.
no.
So I
So
ask what your
let's
perspective on the collection of energy that our consciousness is, what happens to that after we pass?
let's do heart first because I think that's easier. Or we'll do both because our hearts are similar to our brains in the sense that they are made up of a particular pattern of matter, right? I mean, any organ has its own pattern that makes it a heart or a brain or a kidney or whatever, right? So, um, and given that we are alive, which is to say that there's metabolism happening, um, you can measure heat, you can measure um, electromagnetic energy, those types of things. So each bit of matter is going to have its own unique signature, if you will, just from the fact that it's different from the next chunk of matter, living matter. I don't think you get much off rocks except heat. So you do seem to be back to implying that there is something beyond the physical, and you're calling that energy, which I don't agree with if that's what you're saying.
Well, I guess I'm questioning what happens to the form of energy, since we do fundamentally know that the energy of the consciousness is intelligent. It's a different form of energy that we haven't necessarily been able to measure. It's not like physical matter where it's not self-aware, debatably. Some quantum physicists would say that all of physical reality is self-aware in a sense, which is a different topic. But we do know that the consciousness is self-aware, which is a different state of energy.
Let's work with the heart just for a second, and then we'll get to the brain and consciousness.
Yeah.
So, again, are are you saying that there's a form of energy that comes off of the heart that is different than the physical energy that I described?
So the energy of the heart, we've also have evidence to indicate that that is intelligent to the same energy of consciousness.
No, we don't.
I can't prove this claim, but there are a lot of interesting stories related to heart transplants where the receiver, it kind of takes on some of the personality characteristics, and there is an individual unique story of a little girl who went through an interesting situation where she's no longer with us, of course, and that heart was given to another little night, very vividly, of this individual, this man. And
all I can say on that is those are
it sounds like you're familiar with that story.
Well, I mean, I know that there are stories like that out there. I don't see any basis for it, and this is, to my knowledge, if anytime something of a paranormal sort of aura nature is explored, it is shown to be not correct. So, and we know there's, well, whatever. I don't want to discredit anybody's individual experience. So, but no, we don't know what you said. I mean, those stories exist, and that's all we can say about them. They don't seem to have any basis. So let's go to the brain then. So you do seem to be saying that the consciousness is a different sort of energy than energy that occurs in our universe, right? Like equals MC squared energy.
Yeah, we know that. We know that we are by nature intelligent and self-aware. It's a unique collection of energy. There's, I guess, information to this collection of energy that we are individually. Just
as ants have a similar thing. They certainly don't have the self-awareness. You have to get more complex. You have to have a more complex brain to be self-aware, right?
Yeah, I mean, so those are different energy patterns that are measurable. So it's a different, I guess, state of material. So, for example, if we have water and fire, they're both energy patterns, but they interact differently. And then if you apply dirt, it's a different physical energy state. No. So we know and understand that all different states.
We know how water and fire interact, right? We know that fire is a form of energy, and that water is a form of matter. We know how water manifests temperature. So water does not have another form of energy that is not related to its matter. There's no evidence of that at all. So are you suggesting that a dualism, like mind is separate thing from body?
We know it for a fact to be a different energy state.
Okay. Where do you get
they do operate within the same system.
Where do you get the confidence to say that we know this when science, the consensus of science is that these things don't exist?
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding. I interpreted that as you're claiming you don't exist.
No, that's not what I said. That's not what I'm trying to get across. And that's not what I said. That's not what I mean.
Yeah, that's what I misunderstood. My apologies.
Yeah. You said that we know that there's energy that's different, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that there's energy that's different from the energy that comes from our E equals MC squared, energy to mass interchangeability. You're referring to some other thing. We should use another word besides energy then. Is that correct?
No. Well, I guess to clarify, my fundamental claim is that all forms of energy are different. Such as fire and water are different, but they're both forms of energy.
Okay, so let's get more literal then. Let's get more literal, and maybe we'll be able to figure this out. So, because you're using if you're saying that water and fire are different forms of energy, I made the assumption that, and by asking you your first question, actually, that energy and matter are interchangeable according to Einstein's equation. Right? Matter can be converted.
To every action, there's an equal and or opposite reaction. In order for an energy state to change its existing energy state, we need a cause.
No, that's not where I'm going.
No?
No, I'm trying not to lose my train of thought, so I'm not dismissing that. But so energy, okay, mass can be converted into energy, right? It's like that's what happens in a nuclear explosion. Mass gets converted completely into all energy, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so water is not a form of energy. It's a form of mass. It's a form of matter, right? It's hydrogen and oxygen. It's a collection of molecules, and then it's either solid, liquid, or gas, as a general rule. And
water is still energy, though. It's mass in its physical form, but we can apply heat to the physical form of that energy so as to convert it to gas. And it's no longer a mass at that point, I guess, in a sense.
It is mass.
It's more of you can measure it by volume.
This is what I'm trying to get at, because I think you're mistaking the concepts a little bit here. So water is H2O. Okay, one water molecule, H2O. It just sits there by itself. If that's all we have, we don't know if it's ice, water, or gas. It's just one molecule. If you split it up, we can make it into energy. But if it's in a liquid form, it's just in a crystallization. It's held in a crystal matrix. It forms a crystal matrix because the molecule is polar. It's more of a positive charge on one side and a negative charge on the other side, and they just kind of line up in a crystal form. The molecule is still the molecule. In water, it's basically free to sort of fly around, right? Then we get Brownian motion, which is like random motion within liquid, but it's still mass. And in a gaseous form, it is just free floating. And the more molecules there are closer together, the more they bump into each other and then generate. That's heat. We measure that as heat. We call that heat. So all three of those are the same form of. They're all matter. None of them are a form of energy. Okay.
So we can't classify
those are called phases of mass. They can exist in different phases, but it's all mass. They're still all H2O.
So we can't.
If we took, go ahead.
I was going to ask. So we can't classify water as energy?
No. It has to do with how close the molecules are and how they interact with each other. So if we break it down, let's go back to that one water molecule. Okay, oxygen in the middle, two hydrogens coming out like Mickey Mouse ears, and we pull those apart. Now we've got a proton and two electrons. Okay, well, let's fly those apart. Let's just look at the proton. You take the proton apart, and you've got three quarks. And there's a particles called gluons that they're like basically the communication between the quarks that cause them to come together or cause them to stick together when they're close. So we get down to gluons. There's other stuff. That's about as far as I can go with the standard model. Energy is something like fire, where it's completely massless, right? Or like a lot of what would be like inside a star. There's a lot of energy there that comes out as well. Actually, that comes out as particles because that comes out as cosmic rays and photons.
I guess when you say fire is a form of energy, are you more referring to it in the heat that's being given off the gas form of it?
No. Heat is a measure of the density and the speed of a collection of molecules. All right, and there's like a vibration that happens too. If you take water down to absolute zero, which is minus 273 degrees, then it becomes motionless. That's as low as, according to our laws of physics, that things can get, and then they stop vibrating and there's no movement. It just sits there.
So that would be considered potential energy. It's not in motion. But kinetic energy would be the fire in its active form.
Potential energy, this may be a little bit out of my wheelhouse. Potential energy is the difference between what it is and what it could be. So it's like, that may not be right. For example, if you took a ball and you race it up 10 feet, that would have more energy than a ball laying on the ground, right? Because it's in a gravitational field, and if it was free to fall, it would fall. And when it falls, if you like attach a string to it, it could do work, because you could connect something else to it that would spin or whatever. So potential energy is the contained ability to potentially do work, and that ball would not be at zero potential energy until it was literally at the center of the Earth. It gets stopped at the surface of the Earth because of the electromagnetic interaction between the ground. So it's like the ultimate friction, So no,
Gotcha. Yeah, I hear you, and I agree on all that. I guess where our disagreement is that everything is in the universe energy. It just is in different states, but fundamentally everything is made of matter, or there's, in other words, molecules. We have different forms of measurement, so we have kinetic, potential, and then we have different variations of it, solid, liquid, gas. But regardless of the state and whether it's kinetic or potential, everything fundamentally is energy, from what I've learned and what I believe.
You can see. I agree with you, and then you go a different direction with it when I agree with you, because
what do you disagree with as far as like everything being energy? Why would you not classify it?
Because of your definition of energy. So when you say energy like that, you're implying that energy and mass are interchangeable, which they are. But then you go on and start to say that it's a different sort of, there's another energy that comes from has unrelated to that mass, and that's where I'm trying to get that distinction away from you. So if you're going to call whatever that you believe this other thing is, let's call it something else. Let's give it another word.
Yeah, so I guess the example I was trying to drive at is, like, let's say you have a house. There's a multitude of different variations of energy collectively that make the house. Now, let's say you have a fire inside of the house, and it may not necessarily be impacting certain portions of the house. They are separate, but they are also a collective that we could define it.
Well, we want to call a house on fire as a collective of matter and energy. That's a very broad statement.
Yeah. But I guess I think we're disconnecting is like the agreement that our thoughts and our consciousness is energy.
Yes, I would disagree with that. So let's be careful with the language is and stop calling matter energy. Let's just say matter is matter, and we'll put Einstein aside, and we won't try to, put a hydrogen bomb on your house. Let's just call matter matter, and then consciousness. Let's talk about consciousness then. Okay. It appears, from what we know in 2024, that consciousness is a, I wish I was younger. I always forget words when I'm old. Is an emergent property. It's not another thing. Okay? It's not another form of energy or whatever other word we want to put to it.
Would you call it a mass?
Consciousness?
Yeah.
I would not.
If
I
it's
would
not
call it,
mass and it's
I
not
would,
an energy, what would it
I would,
be?
I would call it, it is a, nobody knows, but I'll try to answer your question.
Would it be safe to say the closest thing to understanding it would be fair to classify it as a form of energy
No,
distinctively and
no,
no?
no. The
I
correct
guess that's where we
answer,
would disagree.
no, the correct answer is we don't know. That's the correct answer. All right. So any other answer,
No, that
any other belief is not justified. You can have another belief, but it's not justified. So what
so
it appears to me,
I support that perspective a little bit. So we do know that the brain does operate off of electricity, that it converts glucose into electricity, and that there's 4 billion neurons within the brain that all communicate with one another. But that's done so based on electricity. So the fundamental operating system,
electricity and chemistry.
chemistry.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, it's chemistry. If you look at how a signal goes down a neuron, a single nerve cell, and then communicates to the next cell, there's two different processes. So going down, you've seen those pictures where it's just, here's your neuron, and there's the dendrites up here, and then there's the long piece of it, and there's kind of like a ball at the end, and then there's other dendrites around it. Okay. The signal that goes up through the cell, that's electrical. Okay. And that happens by the movement of calcium and potassium, sodium and potassium, actually calcium too, ions that go in and out of the cell. That changes the inside of the cell versus the outside of the cell from more positive to more negative. And that's the pattern of the electricity. That's what we call electricity. It's the movement of an ion differential. Okay. So once you get to the end, and I'll do this again. Once you get to the end, you have neurotransmitters, which are chemicals that are released from this end, because these pieces, they're always like this. They don't touch. There's a separation. They release chemicals, and there's receptors on this end that accept those chemicals, kind of like locks going into keys. And that creates an ion a potential that generates the next signal. So it's actually both. So you've got chemistry here, and at all the interactions here, you've got, electricity here and chemistry down here. And you've got pluses and minuses. So because some of the chemicals will cause the next communication, and some of them will make it stop. So you've got feedbacks and balances and stuff.
Yeah, I would say that's an energy conversion occurring within the system.
You got to be careful with you're overusing the word energy. You're really overusing it. So, because when a molecule of acetylcholine goes from here to here, that's all it is. It's a molecule. The cell makes acetylcholine as one of the neurotransmitters, and it just goes across that. It just floats across. And it just floods the area with a certain concentration, and then this will pick it up, and this has various amounts of receptors, more or less, and that type of thing. So that's just chemistry.
Yeah, we could call it a chemical state conversion as well, but then we could fundamentally utilize those chemicals, extract them, incorporate them with other chemicals to create an energy reaction, and then we would call it energy at that point.
No, you keep putting the word energy in here. No,
you don't like the word energy
because you're misusing it. You're misusing it. What holds molecules together is electromagnetic charges, positives and negatives. Okay, hydrogens have a negative. Hydrogen atoms have a negative charge. A lot of other stuff like carbon has a positive, and carbon is +4, hydrogen is -1, so you end up with a carbon can hold 4 hydrogens. That's methane. Okay, that's all it is. And if you get 2 methanes and you bring them close enough where they can interact, then you get, 2 of the hydrogens can fly off, and you get a carbon to carbon bond, and now you've got C2H6, and then you just continue down that pathway to whatever, or inorganic and organic compounds. So there's a little bit of energy that comes out of those, because when electrons, this is getting way too deep, but when electrons, when chemical reactions happen, electrons are usually swapped, brought in from other sources, or released. And part of that process is that the electrons will move up and down from different energy levels. And when an electron moves from a higher energy level to a lower energy level, I may have this backwards, so forgive me, all you physicists out there, then a photon or energy is released. So there's some export of energy, and our body puts that out as heat ultimately.
Yeah, okay. I definitely agree with you on that. I think with that topic, I guess we could agree that it would be fair to state that we don't necessarily know how to classify consciousness at this point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, yeah. So, again, if there's something else to consciousness, don't call it energy. We'll give it its own name. Then we don't know what it is. We have not detected anything. It does seem to be just an emergent thing. And I'm not even
the first ones to name it.
Sure.
What name would you give it?
Nobody. Well,
I think we can establish that, and we can.
I think. No, we can't, because it won't become official until the majority of scientists start using it. But
that's true.
Because you keep equating energy to this other thing. I would pick a word that doesn't sound like energy. So pick something that you like, and then something no more than a couple of syllables or whatever, just to make it simple. So I don't know. I mean, like, what would you? Let's say, for example, that auras exist, and it's something different. So look at Star Wars and the Force, right? They have that, metachlorines or whatever they call it.
It's been a while since I've seen it, but yeah.
Then throw that away.
Something like that. Yeah.
I don't know.
I've seen the series before, so I'm familiar with it.
We'll pick a different word then. I mean, what would you call it? Just so you can distinguish between the mass energy conversion from Einstein and another thing that is not convertible to particles in the standard model. So you get to pick your own word, and then use that.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
anyway.
I guess from a different approach, related to the topic regarding, I guess, physics, kind of how I initiated to every action, there's an equal and or opposite reaction. Everything within physical reality, fundamentally, we know with observing things, there is a cause that we can kind of originate everything back to as far as reactions goes.
Apparently. Quantum physics may go against that.
It does. Debatably, a lot of quantum physicists are stating that the universe is eternal.
Well, I'm being more basic than that. I literally just had a conversation with a physicist friend a couple of days ago and asked him this, because I was trying to verify my understanding. If you take a radioactive molecule, plutonium, whatever, it will decay. All right. Now, what causes the decay to happen at X time? We don't know. There's a probability that it'll decay after X time at an X location, whatever, but we don't know. So is there a is it completely random? If it's completely random, then there's no cause. It just happens. Now, it may not be random, but we just don't know what the cause is. That's possible too. But apparently, we don't actually understand it that well at this point. Although this guy was a four-year physicist, so maybe other physicists can answer that better. So it does seem like within quantum mechanics, we're not exactly sure that we can dismiss cause and effect. So between you and I, let's just go with cause and effect, because it kind of like appears to be that way.
Yeah, so, I guess to apply in a perspective to the understanding of the decay of plutonium, and to get your perspective on it, related to, I guess, carbon dating, the whole idea of measuring molecules from the initial observation over X period of time based on a certain set of environment. And then I guess kind of extracting from that how much was lost over that specific set period of time to determine an age. I was given a kind of a candle example at one time where, let's say, for example, we walk into a room and we see a candle that is burning. We can definitely measure the rate at which that candle is burning. However, we don't know if the window was open before we got there, or if there was a change of the environment that caused the acceleration of that candle to burn, dependent on its environment.
Okay.
So I wonder that with...
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to conclude. I wonder that with plutonium, since it's something that we're a bit unaware of at the moment.
Okay. Let's go with carbon. So let's go with carbon dating. I forget the range. We can date things somewhere around 5,000 years or something like that. Maybe it's more than that. Carbon, typically, zero charge carbon is carbon 12. And you can also get ionic differentiation. There's a carbon 14, which it'll carry extra protons? I think it's extra protons. Gosh, I should know that too. Anyways, carbon 14. Carbon 14, as memory serves, occurs in the atmosphere. Cosmic rays cause carbon 12 to become carbon 14, so there's always a certain amount of carbon 14 in the air. It is whatever percentage. They know that it's a consistent percentage. And that gets into our bodies. It gets into the bodies of living things because we breathe, and we then use that. Plants use it, and people use it to a degree to generate. Well, plants actually more so. They use it to generate themselves, right? Plants take up CO2. Certain percentage of that is going to be carbon 14. Now, it's the ratio of the carbon 14. Once you pull up a plant and disintegrate it and analyze how much carbon 12 versus carbon 14 is, you're going to find a consistent ratio. A lot more 12 than 14, but a consistent ratio. And that just has to do with how much was created in the atmosphere. Now, once a thing dies, it's no longer taking in atmospheric carbon. So the 14 will start to degrade down to 12. We know the half-life of that. Let's just say it's 2,000 years. So 50% goes down, 50% goes down again, 50 goes to 25, goes to 12.5, goes to 6.25, etc. So that's how the dating happens, because that ratio of 14 to 12 changes. That half-life, that degradation does not seem to be influenced by other things. It seems to be happening at the atomic level. So it's not affected by things like environment and temperature and things like that.
It's not possible that it could be affected by the amount of oxygen in the atmosphere?
No, this is what happens with carbon. Because,
Gotcha. Okay.
well,
Yeah.
I think, that's my understanding. Let me put it that way, because I guess in a sense, I can see how the amount of carbon in the atmosphere will shift according to how much oxygen there is to bind it. And, is it less likely to become carbon-14 if it's bound to oxygen or what? So there may be other factors that I'm just not aware of. That's just
Yeah. And it's a topic
that's as good an explanation as I am capable of. But you got to know that those who do study this stuff know the answer to that.
Yeah, it's something that I haven't delved myself into too much, so I can't really say a whole lot or get into a very deep discussion on it. But to get back to my previous point, trying to
make one more
your
point
perspective.
while it's in my head. That
Let's just
give me 1 second. Let's just say you're right that the oxygen does affect it. This is why it's also useful for us to study the history of the planet to know what was in the air at different points in time. Because if it does affect it, then we need to know those numbers. But carbon is less of an issue because 5,000 years is a grossly short time on a geological scale. So.
Yeah, definitely. But back to kind of where I started it, not to get too far off topic. What is your perspective? Since there is the agreement between us that everything fundamentally has a cause within our physical reality as we understand it. What do you believe is the, I guess, origination of everything within our world and universe?
You're asking what caused the universe.
Yeah. Do you believe there was or was not a cause?
Okay. We don't know. I'm going to make this distinction. Here's the universe. The universe exists between my two fingers, time zero and present day. So let's just say the cause and effect works within our universe. Right? That's what we agreed on. That's what you're saying we agree on, and we'll throw quantum physics issue aside and say that, yeah. Before time zero, we have no information. We don't know that cause and effect is actually a process that happens. So this is the most common mistake that theists make, and it's a natural, very intuitive mistake, but it's reinforced incorrectly because you cannot apply cause to the origin of the universe, just like you cannot apply the laws of thermodynamics outside of this border. You can apply it within the universe, within this time period, and within the dimensions of our universe, but you cannot apply it to outside. We have no clue what happens, quote unquote, before or outside. So it is incorrect to say that the universe had to have a cause, because we don't know what was before or outside.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. It's one of those things we cannot prove. I guess what I'm struggling with personally is the evaluation of the evidence is that 100% of the time we observe that there is a cause. And I guess your best guess based on the evidence, what would be the evidence that does support the possibility of there not being a cause through observation within life?
We can make no judgments outside of a realm where we know nothing about its makeup. Everything we've experienced, you and I have experienced, seems to have a cause. We are within our own lifetimes, and we are within this one universe. If there's a multiverse, we have no clue what other... there's people who do math on it and have hypotheses on it, but they don't know either. So
yeah.
You can't use the word cause outside of our universe. It is incorrect. It may have a cause, it may not. We don't know. So to make a confident claim either way is unjustified.
Well, that would take away what it means to be a scientist, in that we simply observe the information and we determine what's most probabilistic through theory based on the evidence that we observe.
It doesn't take away about.
I'm just simply asking what you believe.
It is being
which
honest.
Direction you lean in.
I can't lean in any direction because I don't have the information. I don't know is the answer. I can't lean either way.
Okay.
Well, we can lay down 12 different hypotheses about how the universe came to be. And if we had physicists here, I'm sure we would get higher levels of confidence on one or the other. But number one, there's no consensus. So that tells us, that it's a new field, and maybe we'll figure it out one day, and maybe we never will. But you and I have no justification to make adamant conclusions in a realm we have no information on.
Of course, yeah, no conclusions. I guess I would say from my perspective, based on observing consistently within my environment and world, that through my observation, everything having a cause, I theorize personally as my subjective opinion and belief that there is a cause to physical reality in the origin of our universe and world.
You hypothesize, which is correct, which is fine. But I don't, just because you stated that, again, it tells me that you're not quite getting the core concept, which is that once you are considering a time, place beyond before our universe, you cannot apply the rules that exist within the universe. So all of your intuitions cannot be used over there. And that's a really odd thing to accept.
Yeah, again, it's not a definitive position. Yeah. I can't conclude. It's just the direction that I do lean in. I guess one more quick topic in regards to philosophical perspective on things and approach of belief systems in conjunction to hormonal responses. So I've been kind of studying neurology, psychology, and trying to understand why our world is kind of fundamentally falling apart from a hormonal perspective. Why do people experience anxiety and depression? And I've discovered that it is ultimately belief systems in relationship to a set of circumstances, which fundamentally we have control over our own belief systems. That regardless of what anyone says or does, that we subjectively get to choose what we believe in based on what it is we encounter in our worlds.
Almost. We don't choose to believe. We come to beliefs. We make conclusions, and those are the beliefs. There's no choosing after that. To say choosing is just an extra step that doesn't exist. But okay. I don't see that the world is falling apart. In that sense, I don't know if are you getting this from some sort of fallen world kind of concept, or are you getting it just like from a sociological observation?
The statistics of the divorce rate, suicide, the amount of people on medications are apparent that they're skyrocketing.
Have you ever read Steven Pinker's The Better Angels of Our Nature?
I have not, no.
Most people haven't. It's a very interesting book because he collected up all the statistics that are available. It's not much in some of the early times of basically is the kind of like asking the broad question, are things worse than they used to be? And, you look at stuff like life expectancy and happiness and whatever other metric you can possibly get that there's some data on. And things are much, much better now than they ever have been. Now, granted, one nuclear winter could change that whole equation. Yeah. It does. I think that this is a sociological question, so we have to speculate, and this would be a great question for you to ask if you could find a sociologist to ask. I am on the side that populations, so I don't know, anytime you have 1,000 people or more, are generally about the same. Now, we have, in today's world, much more complexity. We interact a lot more, right? We know more, we live closer together. There are a lot more things that impinge on us, from pollution to social media and things like that. So there's a lot that affects us now that did not exist at the time that we evolved to this level of complexity. So in that sense, I can see a reason to say that perhaps, we are not coping as well. We don't have the feedback mechanism. Our feedback mechanism, acetylcholine and fight and flight and stuff, was evolved 2 or 3 million years ago, and before that. And the industrial age is only like mid 1800s. We are coping. We are exposed and impinged upon by so much more than that original environment. That I can see how that's a justification for anxiety, which is to say, our feedback mechanism is not strong enough to counteract that, to make us calm and coping as well as we could. I mean, give us another 3 million years and maybe we would, but then again, things will change a ton more in 3 million years. So in that sense, natural evolution has been overtaken by cultural evolution, because the influence of culture is incredibly quicker than evolution. Evolution happens on the scale of like 1,000 generations, whereas culture changes on the level of generations, like 25 years or something, right? Population growth, density, whatever.
Yeah. I'd like to break that down to understand it a little bit better. So would you say that you believe we do have control over what we think and what we feel, or we don't?
Science is currently telling us that we don't, and because there's so many influences on us, from work pressure to climate change, right? The climate is warmer now than it used to be, so there's a lot of factors that we don't have any control over, to a large degree. So there's that. We do have the ability to think, of course, and we can do philosophy, which means we can think beyond what is physical, right? Because we're capable with this brain, and we have been for at least 200,000 years of thinking abstractly. So that's a blessing and a curse, if you will, because we can get ourselves in trouble sometimes by believing false things. But it also lets us to explore new territory and new concepts.
Yeah, I hear you. I guess what I struggle with is if we fundamentally don't have any control over what it is we can choose to think and feel, how do we rationalize an actor that is able to cry with no circumstances triggering that?
Well, I wouldn't say we have no control. Regardless of us, I'm not. Like I say, it appears that we that we act as if we have free will. So that's good enough for me. So to say that we have no control is I'd say that's incorrect, because we may be determined by the influences on us, but we're not aware of them. So let's just call that free will. Restate what you're saying. I'm going to be a little off there.
Free will is definitely an interesting term, where there's a lot of different perspectives on it, I guess, in the greater context of governments and being involved. But I guess I'm analyzing this more so from the fundamental perspective of our individual day-to-day lives within our own houses, with our family and friends, on the job, within those examples. So yeah, I do agree, and I believe that we have control over those our belief systems in relationship to those circumstances on the more fundamental level with our family and friends,
Yeah.
job.
Yeah, we all
Yeah,
generate beliefs based on um, lots of different factors, but based on our observations, based on what we've been taught, based to some degree on the DNA that we have to work with individually, our own personality factors, based on intuition, based on the situation. Like we may make more black and white decisions when we're under stress, for example. But yeah, we have some control, and we also have the ability, if we do it sometimes, acknowledge that we have the ability to back off sometimes and take ourselves out of a situation. I mean, I did that. My second last job I had was incredibly stressful, tons of multitasking, and I eventually just had to quit. It was just too damn stressful for me. So that was a choice. So we have to be aware of what our priorities are, and that helps us decide. Right? COVID made a lot of people rethink their priorities. Made a lot of people retire. Made a lot of people decide to work from home or change careers and try to go into something they really were interested in, and instead of chasing the last dollar or whatever.
yeah, definitely. What I look at a lot of the time is in relation to the whole free will idea, and if we do have it. I personally believe the whole idea that people need medication in every instance. I'm not going to claim to be a medical doctor and state that certain circumstances don't need certain medications. But I think there's this overwhelming push to medicate in every situation. And it begs the question, does that individual have the ability to overcome that circumstance with a different perspective and belief system so as to have more control over themselves and not be dependent on a
I can
medication?
I can answer this firsthand. I am a retired pharmacist, and I have an anxiety disorder, which I've had my entire life. At least I'm aware of since age about 8. So I completely, to a degree that education provides. I have a doctorate in pharmacy. Understand the neurology and the neurochemistry and stuff. And I also have this disorder, which is essentially causes irrational fears. Fear of social situations, and fear of being like feeling self-conscious, overly self-conscious, that kind of a thing. But
I
there's
wouldn't say
also,
that's irrational. I would say we all face that to a
well,
degree.
no, it's a matter of degrees. And what it really comes down to, and it's a couple books that led me to this too, to understand that it is a overreactive nervous system that it does it. And there's some of it in my family, which means there's some genetic basis to it, which means there's some of it's in my DNA, which is to say that that's how my brain was built based on the recipe from the DNA. To some degree, when you're treating somebody who has anxiety, you try to use the least invasive therapies possible. That's why you start with talk therapy, right? And if that doesn't work, you can go to things like mindfulness and meditation and biofeedback and things like that. And then medication becomes the last, well, kind of the second last. And then the most extreme examples, which would be like somebody with a really, really bad clinical depression, shock therapy is basically the bottom of the barrel, at least in current society. It used to be lobotomy, but that's essentially ridiculous. But no, I know from experience, personal experience, that I was not able to overcome that without medicine, my life would be very different. I am able to do things with medications that I could never do before. I was not able to. I was extremely uncomfortable talking to other people. I was extremely uncomfortable going to restaurants and things like that. I made a decision early in pharmacy school, actually, just when I was like a kid, going to parties and stuff. It's like I want to socialize and go out, but it hurts too much. I'm like this the whole time, and it was like a balance between comfort and pain, if you will. Even though I wanted to do these things, it just turned out to be that I was not capable of doing it. So there has to be, you got to find the balance, and sometimes you do have to recognize that your limitations. If I had one arm, I can't operate the same as somebody with two arms. I just couldn't. And it's that on a different scale, if you will. So the medication for me, and my dose has not changed in 35 years. So yay for that. Allows me to live a normal life. Not that I am completely anxiety free, but enough that I don't have to do more than I'm doing.
Yeah, I resonate with you on that. I remember a story back in high school in speech class, stuttering for 5 minutes straight in front of the entire classroom and feeling like I wanted to rip my own hair out and like absolute garbage on the inside, and not understanding why.
Why am I different? Why is this easy for other people, not for me?
And at parties, I want to go talk to people and I just can't. I can't. It's like this feeling inside of you is pinning you down.
Yeah.
You just can't pick yourself up to do it.
And you have to make a decision. I mean, I told a pharmacist a couple years into graduating at the hospital I was working at, I told him about my anxiety disorder because I hadn't told anybody about it before then. I hid it best I could. And he hugged me. And it's just like, I'm so proud of you for getting through this. I mean, because he had a friend who unalived himself, who had severe depression and anxiety. So the fact that I made some sort of life decision and dealt with it, I mean, I'm not saying I'm the same as the other guy, because there are some people that cannot overcome it, literally cannot, with any treatment. And that's unfortunately very sad, of course. But no, it's the idea that you can just turn it off or make it go away, or, not be gay, these types of things that are innate to us to some degree, or that are just really, even if it's a learned behavior, because some of these things are learned behaviors, you can't turn them off. I mean, learned behaviors can imprint on you. You can do some things depending on what the behavior is to try to learn, to unlearn it. Mixed success depending on what it is. And you certainly try, and you try to have a better life than not. Yeah, and you certainly try to have a life rather than not, because that's always preferable.
Yeah, anxiety is something that I have dealt with for my entire life, and still, as of recently, have experienced micro amounts of it. I can say that I have gotten past it personally. And what's led me on that has been this journey of wanting to understand why and questioning it. And there are a lot of studies done in regards to, I guess, quote unquote, the imagination and belief into something and the power that it has, and studies done on placebo, from a multitude of different variables. And consistently we see that placebo is a real thing.
Yeah.
And we kind of, I guess, brush it off as a society.
But the placebo only works to a degree. That's the thing. A placebo effect, if you do drug studies, and psychology studies too, but the placebo effect accounts for somewhere around 20% of the effect. That's an odd way to put it, but that's, if you look at the studies, that's how it kind of rolls out. So, or maybe even less. So it is a benefit. It can be a benefit, but often it's not enough for somebody like me with my level of anxiety from wherever my physiology is to overcome it. It can lessen it a little bit. So, but if it works for you, terrific. And oddly enough, placebo effect still works even if you know it's a placebo effect, which is kind of hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah, and what you just said, you hit that beautifully. You hit the nail on the head. If it works for you, it works for you in regards to more so controlling your internal state.
Yeah, and what that implies too is if it works for you, it works for you. So if it doesn't work for somebody else, don't put them down for it.
Yes, right? Exactly.
Yeah, because it's like autism. It's a spectrum. There's multifactors. There's 12 different neurotransmitters that are in play and stuff. People are different, and don't walk around and think that, well, because I overcame it, you can overcome it. Kind of a thing. Just the way I did. So.
Yeah, exactly. Not in the sense of just the way I did. I think that is a negative belief system to implant on someone, that you have to do it this specific way. Because if it doesn't work, what does that person then believe at that point? That they're a failure or they can't do it? I think the belief system of, I can do it, so you can do it, but you have to find your own way.
Yeah, I mean, if you tell someone you should be able to do it the same way I did, you're assuming that their ailment is exactly like yours.
Yeah,
we are way too different. We are way too different as individuals.
Yeah, exactly. But it puts into question, and it did put into question for me, just how powerful is the mind and the belief in something. And I guess kind of breaking down those studies within placebo. In the studies where I kind of analyzed where the individuals were told, like, for example, within weightlifting, where one group was given sugar pills, and they were told that the sugar pills were steroids. And then they had another group where they didn't give them anything, and they took them through the exact same routines. Everything was exactly the same. And the group that got the sugar pills that were told steroids, they got 300% better results. It's like,
300% better, 300% better than the control group, not better than the ones that took the steroids.
Correct. Better than the control group.
Yeah, better than the control group,
they didn't take anything.
Not better than the active drug. Yeah.
There were no actual steroids in the study. Nobody was given any steroids.
Then that's not a full study. That's ethically, I think that's all you can do for that particular thing. But if you're testing a medication, you want a full double-blind controlled study, which is you have a control group which you do nothing to. You can do the placebo group, and then you do the active med group, and you compare those three. And then double-blind means even the people giving the medication don't know what the medication is. Somebody else packages them and makes them all look the same, and it has like a number on it or something, so they can decipher it after the fact. But so you don't want any bias coming into it all. Like, you don't want someone handing you your meds and going, "It's real,"
Yeah.
Because that's a bias.
Yeah, but those studies, I've gotten into so many of them, and they're just beyond fascinating.
It is fascinating. I mean, you're right. That's that they can have some steroid effect on a placebo, but I guarantee you, if they had a proper third group with the steroid group would do better.
Yeah, more than likely. Yeah, no, I definitely wouldn't argue that.
Anyways, let's wrap this up. This has been fascinating. I really appreciate you. Call back.
I appreciate you as well. I would just like to summarize and conclude what I tried to get at. My position on everything is that I do believe that our beliefs are the number one determining factor in the quality of our life. And when we do experience something in our lives that we do not prefer, that there typically, from my experience, there always is an underlying belief system and relationship to that negative experience. And that by taking the time to sit down with that internally and really reverse engineer the belief in conjunction to that emotion, I always find something, I guess, that I look down on myself. And with changing that perspective within me, it wasn't a shift overnight. It was, I guess, a workout routine of going through circumstances in life and re-challenging that belief system. It's been a grueling process to overcome the anxiety. Believe me.
I do. Trust me, I do.
From my personal experience, I want to share that there's hope to everyone.
There definitely is. There definitely is. I mean, beliefs are a big influence, obviously, I think, on our behavior, how we behave. I think we should, and this is more of a philosophy. This is not a thing in nature, but I think we should go for as many true beliefs as possible, because then we are more likely to do things that will be more functionally productive, that give us better results than false beliefs. Because if we believe in something false, at best you got the placebo effect, at best. Which is something.
If it works for them, it works for them.
Yeah, but you could also do better if you had a true belief. You know, a false belief will not let you build a rocket to the moon. You know, but a whole set of
I agree with that.
will. So we do better with true beliefs. So let's just try to strive for true beliefs and fewer false beliefs.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's a good note to end on.
All right.